Hi and welcome back. In this video we're going to have a look at parallel compression, which is sometimes also called New York compression. It's actually a very simple technique, but it can make your drums sound a lot punchier, and it's really achieved by just mixing two versions of the drum sound together, one that's heavily compressed and another one that isn't, or is just a dry signal. And in Ableton Live there's actually several ways of achieving this, because it's one of its strengths is really with all its different routing options and its racks. If you're not using Ableton Live, it's okay, we'll have a look at a few different ways of doing it and some that will be more relevant to your DAW. And we'll also have a quick look at how to set it up in Logic, which again will probably be more universal. But first of all, in Ableton Live, the simplest way you can do it is really just to go to the compressor, right click on it, group, which is Command G or Control G on PC, and that just basically puts it in an empty shell, which is called an audio effect rack. If you press this button here, that opens it up and allows us to have a look at the effects chain. Now you can stick as many audio effects as you like along that chain, but what you can also do is right click on it, create another one in parallel. And this one, if you don't put any effects on it, then it's basically the same as a dry track within the track. So this is essentially the same as having two audio tracks on this one track here. So we'll turn down the first one, which is the compressed one, and just hit play, and you can see what's happening here. The meter's lighting up on both on the input because the mix is turned down here. There's nothing coming to the output on the compressor here, but we're still getting it lighting up on the compressor because it's still going through the effect. It's just this mixer actually comes after the effect. Now as we start turning that up, let's turn the dry one down. You can hear that's very compressed. What I've done is set a very fast release time, fairly high ratio. I've actually given it a bit of a soft knee setting so that it's a bit smoother, and also set it to opto for the same reason. More of a linear curve, might just be a little bit smoother. Neither of those two options are essential, it's just something I did as I was setting it up. So have a play with the different settings and see what works for you. But really the main aim was to get this sounding over compressed, like that really big over the top, slightly Led Zeppelin-y sound. And that way, when you turn up the dry signal, you've got the normal drum sound that retains that original dynamic range, the difference between the loudest and quietest parts of the sound. And then, as we turn this up, we're getting the two mixed together, and that creates a much bigger, punchier sound because we've still got all that dynamic range there, we've still got all the transients preserved exactly as they were on the original track, but we've got it mixed with that compressed sound so that we get all the nice effects of the compressor. And that's essentially all that parallel compression is. It's just two chains in parallel doing the same drums, one with compression and one without. So there's other ways of doing that. I'm just going to turn that audio effect rack off, and I'm going to drag this compressor to one of the return tracks here. If you don't already see a return track up the top here in Ableton Live, you can insert return track here by right clicking or by using that keyboard shortcut. But usually there's a couple there by default. So now what I'm going to do is send to that return track by using these sends here. Now this is probably a more universal way of doing it. In Logic, they're not called sends and returns, they're called buses or bus tracks. We'll see that in a moment. But basically the only thing you want to do is set this to pre. That means pre-fader. That means it will still work even if this is turned down. So see what's happening there is as I turn the send up, I'm sending the signal from this track into the return here, but there's nothing on the original track itself. That's because I've got it set to pre-fade. If it's post-fade, it will only send signal if this is turned up. So turn that up until we've got a fairly loud signal, and then that's another really simple way of doing it. The main disadvantage in my mind of doing it this way is that you've got them separate. so that it's just visually not as easy to see that they're paired together, because you're likely to only really want the compressed track that you're using for parallel compression to go with that drum sound. You're not going to probably want to use it again on something else. If you do, you might want to set up a separate compression track. Say if you wanted to use parallel compression on a vocal track, you'd probably give it its own parallel compression track. In DAWs that don't have drum racks like Ableton Live, or in situations where maybe if you've used the multi-track versions of the MIDI files, then you might have a setup like this where you've got the kick, snares, tom, etc. all on separate tracks. So in this case, what we're going to do is just create another 2 audio tracks. Insert audio track here, Command T or Control T on PC. And we're just going to route all of these tracks to the first one. So kick and then percussion. If I hold shift, I can select all of them at once and set audio to 9 audio. I'm going to actually rename that drums bus. And then on the final one, parallel comp. And I like to color them so that they stand out as bus tracks. Now when I hit play, I'm going to mute the first track because that's the one we were working on before. Then you've got to set monitor to in like this. If you can't see this section here, then it's this button here to show or hide it. And that means we can now bus everything to that drums bus. So we want this monitor set to in. And that means we can now bus everything to that drums bus. And then we want to choose audio from the drums bus on this one here. And if we set monitor to in, then we get a doubling up of that track. Now at the moment the compressor's not on there. I'm going to go back to the original track. In fact, I'll drag both of these on and we'll try both of them. And of course, as the audio is coming from the drums bus, then we can't really solo the parallel compression track on its own because it cuts out the source audio. Even if we solo both together, you can see when we turn the drums bus down, we can no longer hear what's going on. So what you can do is set this here to post FX. That means that the sound is being taken from after any effects that might be on that track, but before the mixer. So when you turn the mixer down, you're still passing audio to the parallel compression track. That allows you to more easily listen to both of them separately. So this is the R comp, that's pretty heavily compressing it there. I might switch across and try the V comp here. And getting a different idea of the way that different compressors can affect it. So again, a very simple process. Not a lot to it really. In Logic, it's actually fairly similar to Ableton Live in that we're going to be using bus tracks, which are kind of like using the sends in Ableton Live. And also, because we're using the Ultra Beat drum module here, which is kind of similar to Ableton's drum racks in that all the drum sounds are contained on the one audio track ultimately. So even though I've got the multi-track MIDI clip here so that all the drum sounds are separate, they're all using that same track. So if we have a look in the mixer, there's only the one track for Ultra Beat. So that makes it nice and simple as far as routing them to the compressor goes. What we're going to do is click here under sends, choose a bus. Bus 1 will do. If you haven't already got any buses set up, then that'll be the first one. And it automatically creates an auxiliary track here. What we do then is stick the compressor on there. So I'll just use the Logic one and give it some pretty extreme settings, just like we did previously. Might set that to peak, higher ratio, faster release. And just at the moment, we can't hear anything, but as we turn that bus up, there you go. Might set the auto gain to -12 and give us a bit more gain. In fact, maybe I'll just turn that off and do it manually. So I don't have to worry about the clipping so much. Although you can turn on the limiter there just to watch those peaks. So now if I unsolo that, there's the dry signal and there's the compressed signal. Now you probably also want to set that bus to pre-fade. We just click and hold on there, set it to pre-fader. And that way, even if we turn that down, we're still getting it there sent to the bus. So that's it, really pretty straightforward. Okay, thanks for watching.